Hey parents, have you ever asked your children, how was school today? Did they ever answer, school is dumb? Well then, this podcast is for you. Listen in as we unpack why children say school is dumb and discover what it really means. I'm your host, Shannon Hazel, also known as the Parents Educator. After 25 years of teaching and being a parent myself, I've heard every reason as to why school is dumb. So let's dive in and uncover what it really means. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's conversation is about learning to read. I think as parents, this is one of those prominent worries we have. Will my child learn to read? Is my child where he or she needs to be in terms of reading skills? We somehow inherently know the importance of being able to read in day-to-day life and the potential lifelong struggles that our children may endure without those solid reading abilities. So my guest today is an elementary teacher, and she's also a mom to 3 school-age children herself. So she can really relate on a personal level to this topic. And she's taken the initiative to develop a play-based small group tutoring program that is based on the science of reading research. She uses a multi-sensory approach to teach children to read, and her company is called Crushing Limits Education Co. And I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast, Andrea Maziak. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, friend.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Excellent. I'm super excited to have you here today to talk about reading. It's one of my favorite topics. And it's a super important topic, so I'm glad we get to chat about this.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you. So should we maybe start at the beginning, because there's lots of, I think, things out there in the education world and a little bit in the media about this science of reading. It seems to be like it's something new. It's this new big push somehow, yet it's been around for a long time. Are you able to maybe tell us a little bit about that research?
Yeah, so the science of reading is a decades-long body of research. So as new as it seems to a lot of people hearing it for the first time, it's something that's been out for a very long time. And it's a bunch of research that's compiled and kind of tells us how the brain works to learn to read. So it tells us that we need to take a systematic, explicit approach to teaching children to read. So we're, going back to the basics, teaching them the rules of phonics and the English language. And we also engage our learners using a multisensory approach. So we're tapping into those areas of the brain that we wouldn't always associate with reading.
Right. So way beyond the, do you know your letters of the alphabet?
Exactly.
And that maybe whole language approach where we just, for a little while in education, went at it, that kids will almost learn by osmosis how to read, just giving them all the big language pieces and not breaking it down into those little sub pieces that are really important to learn to read. Yeah,
so we're kind of steering away from memorizing words and actually understanding how we construct and deconstruct words and how language works.
Great. Okay, so I'm excited to get into this today, and hopefully parents listening can gain a little bit of knowledge for themselves when they're working with their own children at home. Reading. So you touched a little bit on the multisensory approach. Can you kind of explain to us a little more explicitly, what does that mean? What does that look like?
So when we think about a multisensory approach and our senses, we're usually thinking about our 5 senses, right? Hearing, touch, taste, feeling, and seeing. Mm-hmm. But we also have other senses, such as balance, that we can tap into to kind of activate those areas of the brain that we don't always associate with reading, to make that learning stick. So the more areas of the brain that we can engage, really the more engaged our students are, and the more they are able to process and understand what they're doing.
Okay, so it's trying to take those different senses and make them work together at the same time.
Exactly.
So that if you have different learning styles, it's addressing your learning style, but also bringing in some other layers.
Right.
Okay, I get this. All right, so let's just think about the normal progressions of reading for a moment. And if you have a child come into school, or maybe they're still at home and they're starting to learn to read, what are some of those natural things that those progressions will see kids go through?
So first, children typically learn to identify letters and associate those with sounds. And then they start to string those sounds together and realize that those create words. From there, you might notice that they're able to point out familiar words or words that they are the high frequency words that they see all the time.
Maybe like their name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or environmental print. They might recognize the sign at McDonald's that
Right.
says McDonald's and understand that, words or letters together are words that have meaning. So then from there, they start to develop phonological awareness, which means that they can do things like break down words into syllables, or they can identify rhymes and initial and ending sounds, and demonstrate an understanding of the way that words are created and constructed.
Mm-hmm. I know in my teaching practice, two big things that I always like to work on with kids right away, and it kind of gave me a snapshot of how their reading skills are coming is, if I blend a word, can they hear the word, and can they rhyme?
Exactly.
Right? Those are some big skills that sometimes we don't associate, maybe as parents, that really helps your child learn to read, and we get stuck with the pointing to the letters and the sounds and the sound identification and just reading a whole book. But there's so many other ways you can play with words and sounds without even having print in front of you.
Right, and that's why there's so much value to things like nursery rhymes and those little songs that we sing, right? And that all helps our phonological awareness, which is one of the key components to learning to read. And then also, as students develop that phonological awareness, they also become more fluent readers. So they're able to read with expression. It almost sounds like conversational as they're reading. And then they also develop that comprehension aspect. So you're able to ask them about what they read. Do they understand what they read? What was the main point? What information were they able to obtain from what they read? And that indicates, they're pretty far on their reading journey. They're strong readers.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of the spectrum from learning some letters all the way to understanding what you're reading and making sense of it and being able to do something with that information.
Right. Reading for a purpose.
Reading for a purpose, because the goal of reading is to make meaning.
Exactly.
Ultimately. Okay. So now we have our kiddos in school or maybe at home, and they're learning to read. And what might be some things that, if parents are noticing, might indicate that their child is struggling, or be some indicators that maybe they need to, have that conversation with the teacher or some other professionals? Where do we see language breakdown sometimes, or reading breakdown?
So if you notice that your child has an emotional reaction to being asked to read, that's an indicator that they're struggling, right? Mm-hmm. If they have some apprehension there, some emotion. And then if you're listening to your child read and you're noticing that they're stumbling over words or guessing a lot of words based on that first sound, or omitting words, that's another indicator that, there could be a little bit of a struggle there. And then just like we were talking about with the comprehension piece, even if they're able to read, but they're not able to tell you what they read, or answer any questions about it, again, that's another indicator that perhaps they need a little bit of support.
And I think that's an important one, because often as parents, we think, well, my kid can read, because if you put text in front of them, they can decode or they have memorized those words.
Right.
But we forget that the whole point of reading is making meaning and being able to do something with that information. So, and maybe that's the piece that we really want to, highlight here today, is that it's not just about the reading skills, it's about what you can do with that information. And I think for parents, it could be a little bit frustrating that when they're not doing their homework or they're not doing something that they're supposed to do with that reading, we start to think they're being lazy, or they just don't want to do it, they're not trying. But it could be that they're a great reader that isn't understanding what they're reading.
Exactly. Going back to that emotional piece, right? So if you're noticing that they're feeling really frustrated when they're meant to read, and it's eliciting a big response from them, that's exactly what,
Yeah. And I feel like I'm probably going to say this a lot on my podcast, but all behavior is communication.
Yes.
So if you're seeing behavior from your child, it's communicating something. And if that behavior is happening always around reading, it's communicating something. And then it's our job as adults to figure out what that is.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So on the same kind of note, what might teachers be telling parents? What might they be hearing from the school, or seeing on a report card, other than the obvious grade? But what are some things that teachers might be reaching out to parents about if they're starting to see their child struggling with reading?
So you might see those words that we've mentioned earlier today, encoding and decoding. They might be struggling with that, which means they're struggling with, putting together sounds to create words. They're struggling with breaking apart words and getting meaning from that as well. They might not read with fluency. So that means, again, they're not reading with expression. They're not reading in a conversational way, maybe, again, omitting words, things like that.
I think a lot, too, in education, we talk in those words like encoding, decoding, phonemic awareness, fluency. And I really want to empower parents to say to teachers, if you don't know what those words mean, or they're talking and they're saying words that you're not familiar with, ask what they mean. Because if you just kind of nod and say, oh, okay, my child's struggling with fluency, but you don't know what fluency is, then how do you help them? How do you help them, right? So we really have to, ask educators and teachers and people working with our children to break those things down for us so that we can get at the heart of what's really being communicated.
Right. And often we're given a next step as well. And if you're not sure how to follow through with that next step at home, that's another thing you can ask about, right? So if I know sometimes my children have had comments like, at home, practice whatever math skill. And if I wasn't a teacher, I might not know how to approach that. So definitely ask for tips and advice, and your child's teacher will be happy to give that
and I think too, especially in primary, a lot of educators have some sort of a take-home program too, right? Like whether they're taking home some leveled books or they have words to practice or those sorts of things. So I think that's a big area where parents can jump on board and try to connect with that learning and make it fun at home and support their children. So that's another piece maybe that parents can kind of look for and tap into. Okay, so now let's talk about the big question. What do we do when our kids are struggling? So, we have a child who's school age and school's communicating that there's, some breakdowns and parents are seeing them as well. How do we support our struggling readers and those that maybe aren't meeting their benchmarks to kind of keep moving along the continuum?
So we want to make sure that learning doesn't feel like a chore. We don't want it to feel like something that they are forced to do. And so part of that is making it fun. So if you can, do things like go to the library together and make it an outing, or go to the bookstore and pick out a book and make it a big deal. Something we do in my family is Flashlight Fridays. So we'll build a tent, we'll grab a flashlight, and we'll all read. But it took some progress to get there. We didn't start there.
Yes, so, for sure.
We started with a lot of really fun hands-on, like basic activities, like sounding out words and then writing them in shaving cream. Again, tapping into that multisensory approach, right? And just doing things that perhaps don't just, when we think about helping our children read, a lot of people think that that's just a matter of sitting down and reading. But there's so much more that you can do, so much more to it. Going back to basics, though, I think is huge. So, explaining to children, how does our language work? How do we string together words? How do we...
I think there are some good options too for some educational toys and games and things out there. If you're a parent at home and you're thinking, okay, I'm not a teacher, I don't know how to teach children to read, but I think the internet is our friend, and there's games and there's activities and things that you can do. But I think you're right. The goal is to try and make it fun. Is that going to solve, significant deficits in reading? Maybe not, but it's going to make it a lot more fun for your child to engage in reading again, and then be willing to maybe put in that extra work that they're needing to put in to get to where they need to be.
Right. And don't police what they read, assuming that it's, age appropriate. But I find that so many people dismiss things like graphic novels or magazines or things that our children really want to read. And as a former teacher librarian, I can vouch for the enthusiasm children get around, certain types of materials. And that's okay. And that's still them practicing those skills that they need to read down the road for information or, for other purposes.
Yeah.
So.
And I think one of the big ones too is, our children want a game, right? They want a game with their friends after school and on the weekends. And, what I love a little bit about that is that a lot of times they're messaging back and forth while they're playing. And so not only do they have to be able to type up the message, they have to be able to read what their friend wrote to know how to respond appropriately. So, even though they're gaming and they're having some fun, there really is a little bit of learning going on there with reading and writing as they message back and forth with the friends that they're playing with.
Yeah, those things go hand in hand. Right. And so even engaging your child in writing activities. Write a letter to a friend, or write a Christmas list instead of just, picking out the pictures that you want. Try sounding out the different things that you want, and maybe write a letter to Santa, or write a grocery list. Tell me the things you want in your lunch, and that sort of thing as well, right?
Yeah, so I think maybe the message here is that, as parents, you might not have all the nitty-gritty tools necessary to help children learn to read, such as educators and schools do. However, you can really make learning fun, make it a family activity, find some great books to enjoy together, and just help create that whole mindset, that positive mindset about reading.
Right. And I think modeling too is huge. So if you're able to just read in front of your child for leisure, that might be something that they pick up and that they notice, want to do themselves.
Okay, so now for the parents at home, we've really tried to engage in some of this reading at home for fun. The school's working on the academic piece of it. How do we know when strategies are working for our children in terms of reading?
I think you'll see a sense of enthusiasm. You'll see that attitude shift, even in terms of body language. Like I notice when my students feel more confident and they're getting into it, they're getting all excited. And then you'll notice that a lot of the time children will start to read organically. So they'll look around and they'll say, oh, this says this, or this is the same letter that my name starts with. And you'll start to notice those connections forming, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I find when that confidence starts coming, you can't stop them.
No.
Because they just want to point out every word they just read and everything they see that they know. And it almost takes over all their thinking. That's all they can think about, right? And it can be challenging, but it's also like such a joy to see when that does click and a child's making progress.
We have the closed captioning on our television.
Right.
And it got a little bit frustrating for a while because my son was trying to read constantly along with it at 5 years old. And so there were some words that were beyond him, but he was just so eager because he knew the strategies to attack those words. And so it's reading along with everything.
Yeah, every little bit of reading you sneak in, however you get that in, is a good thing.
Absolutely,
for sure. Okay, so if actually, you know what? Before we kind of wrap up here, I want to hear a little bit about your program. So, Crushing Limits Education Company. So, what's the reason behind that, and what are you hoping to accomplish with your program there?
So we noticed a pretty big shift in just children in general after COVID. And, we just wanted to make a difference. We saw that there were a lot of deficits when it came to literacy, and that children had missed a lot of that face-to-face instruction, and even the social aspect of learning, right? So we noticed that the strategies we were using in our classrooms based on the science of reading were really working, and the kids were so engaged and having fun. And we wanted to kind of create an extracurricular that would benefit children, but also, boost their confidence, help them, socialize. And so we developed this play-based program based on the science of reading that just kind of goes back to the basics and, really teaches children in that systematic, explicit way.
Right.
How to read. So we're, teaching phonics and teaching the different rules and patterns of the English language, but we're doing it in a fun way. So we're playing games, we're, playing The Floor is Lava and all sorts of things so that, it's something that they want to come to.
Right. That's amazing. I've been kind of following along with your journey, and you're doing some great things there.
Thank you.
No problem. So if for parents listening at home, if they're feeling like, maybe this is my child, maybe there's some struggles here with reading, what would you recommend? What are their next steps?
So there are definitely lots of programs out there, maybe not play-based, but, there are different after-school options, even like tutoring and things like that. But I say first and foremost, talk to your teacher. Figure out, how you can maintain an open line of communication. You want to know how they're doing, how you can help at home, what they're doing at school, so that you can kind of like find those opportunities to kind of build on that learning whenever you can. But just the communication piece is so key.
I think so. And I don't know a teacher who doesn't love an engaged parent.
Yes.
Right. And if you've got a parent at home that's really in tune with their kid and really trying to work and do their part to be a partnership with the school and help that child, teachers will feed you everything you need to be successful, right? Because it really does take a team effort.
Yes.
To help our kiddos.
It does.
Learn, especially to read. It's such a huge life skill. that we asked them to do at 5.
Right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, thank you, Andrea, so much for being here. You can find more about Crushing Limits on their website at crushinglimits.ca or on their social media handles. I appreciate you having here. Come back anytime.
Thank you. It was awesome.
And to the parents listening at home, thank you for joining us. If you're a parent looking for more tools, strategies, or resources to support your child's learning, please visit my website, theparentseducator.com, or follow me at The Parents Educator on all social media platforms. Thanks for listening to the podcast, School is Dumb. More episodes can be found on your favorite streaming platform. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.